This is the story of the Star Wars murders. You'll see what I mean. The year was 1982. The Cold War still had an icy grip on the world, and the USA and USSR were locked in a heated nuclear arms race. The threat of annihilation was a very real, very deep concern for the everyday person, and both the East and West were desperate to research new technologies that could protect their nations against a nuclear attack. That's where Marconi Electronic Systems came in. Marconi was a British company that was working on a number of top-secret defense projects. These projects included Cosmos, an underwater guidance system, and Star Wars. No, not the movie. The US defense system proposed by Ronald Reagan. The scientists working on Star Wars had one main purpose: to design a space-based, anti-missile system that could intercept and destroy enemy nukes. The Marconi company's work was obviously of vital importance. So, needless to say, when a number of the scientists working on these projects began to die in a series of bizarre accidents and suicides, a few eyebrows were raised. It all began with Dr. Keith Bowden, a leading computer scientist who worked at Marconi. He was driving home from a social gathering in London one evening. On his way back, he drove his car off the side of a bridge and crashed into an abandoned rail yard. He was killed on impact. The police initially claimed that Bowden was intoxicated and driving too fast, but his friends at the party said he hadn't even been drinking that evening. His lawyer hired a private investigator to work on the case. This investigator found something truly bizarre. Somebody had swapped the pristine tires on Dr. Bowden's car with a set that were old and extremely unsafe. Nobody knew who had changed the tires over. It definitely wasn't Dr. Bowden. As far as his family knew, the tires on his car were fine when he left for the party. After Dr. Bowden was out of the picture, 3 more of Marconi's scientists allegedly ended their own lives in quick succession. First was radar designer Roger Hill, who blew himself away with a shotgun. Jonathan Wash was next. He jumped from a hotel window. Then came the turn of Vimal Dajabai, who plunged from the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol, over 100 miles from London where he worked. He was found with his pants around his ankles and a needle-sized wound on his buttock. The coroner ruled that all 3 deaths were suspicious, but was unable to make any other definitive claims. 2 months after finding Dajabai, Arshad Sharif, another Marconi computer scientist, was also found in Bristol. He had driven all the way there for some unknown reason, and people who saw him said he was acting strangely. He checked into a hotel and paid using high-denomination banknotes. The next day, he apparently tied his neck to a tree with a nylon rope, got inside his car, and then slammed his foot on the accelerator. His head was torn clean off his shoulders. While investigating the gruesome scene, a metal rod was found by his feet in the vehicle. This rod could have easily been used to jam down the accelerator. "This is past coincidence," said the coroner. "I will not be completing this inquest until I know how 2 men with no connection to Bristol came to meet the same end here." All of these grisly incidents took place over the course of 3 years. In the following year, however, the pace of the accidents and suicides increased dramatically. Let's go over them quickly. Brace yourselves, this gets pretty wild. Richard Pugh, who was found in his apartment. His feet were bound, and there was a plastic bag over his head. A large, thick rope was coiled around his body. His demise was determined to be the result of experimental misadventure and ruled as an accident. Dr. John Britton, who suffocated on carbon monoxide in his own garage. Marconi engineer David Skeels, who was found in his car with a hose attached to the exhaust pipe. Victor Moore, who suffered an overdose. Peter People, who was found underneath his car with his mouth next to the exhaust pipe. After an evening out with his friends, he told his wife that he was going to put the car away and that he'd be right back. His body was found in an unnatural position, as if it had been jammed under the vehicle by somebody else. John Whitman, who drowned in his bathtub. The tub was surrounded by pills and alcohol bottles, despite there being no trace of either substance in his system. David Sands, who made a sudden U-turn while driving. He crashed into a cafe. Strangely, his car was filled with cans of gas and erupted into a ball of flame upon impact. Mark Wisner, who, like Richard Pugh, was found with his feet bound and plastic wrapped around his face. This was also determined to be an adventurous asphyxiation. Russell Smith, who jumped off a cliff in Cornwall. Trevor Knight, yet another victim of exhaust fumes. Shani Warren, who drowned in 18 inches of water. Her hands were bound behind her back, her feet were tied, and her mouth was gagged. Somehow, after doing all this to herself, she hobbled over to the water in 4-inch high heels. On the exact same day, another scientist accidentally fell off a railway bridge to his demise. Michael Baker and Frank Jennings, 2 scientists at one of Marconi's other defense firms, were also found slain. Okay, this was clearly getting a little suspect now, and politicians began to take notice. The final straw came when 2 senior figures at the Marconi company died in eerily similar ways at the end of 1988. Alistair Beckham was doing some light gardening at his home one afternoon when he wandered into his garden shed to take a break. His wife, wondering what he was doing for so long in there, went to check on him. She found him with wires connected to his chest and a handkerchief in his mouth. The wires were plugged into plug sockets. He had apparently electrocuted himself. Mere hours after his electrocution, men from the Ministry of Defense came to examine the scene and took some undisclosed documents and files away with them. John Ferry, the second senior figure at Marconi, met an almost identical fate. The only difference was the electric wires were attached to the metal fillings in his teeth. Union leader Clive Jenkins described all of these deaths as statistically incredible, and people had finally started to take notice. Soon, there were rumors of a Russian conspiracy. As one American news correspondent put it, in the world of espionage, there's a saying, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, but 3 times is enemy action. The British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher pooh-poohed such claims and said that there would be no inquiry into the incidents. This, of course, fueled interest in the mystery, and soon people started digging deeper. It came to light that many of the scientists were in the process of leaving their jobs and taking their expertise elsewhere. Others had complained that they had been made to perform tasks that were strange, impossible, and unscientific. Several had even scheduled meetings with their local politicians shortly before their demises. This has led some people to speculate that the UK or US governments may have been involved in the deaths somehow, as a way to stop important defense secrets from falling into the wrong hands. Perhaps these scientists had stumbled upon some findings that were too important to let slip, and, as a result, were permanently silenced. Perhaps they were getting too hard to control, or were asking too many questions. Elsewhere in Europe, other scientists working on the United States Star Wars project died in even more conspicuous ways. 2 defense workers in West Germany were killed in 1986, one the victim of a car bomb. Other leading defense figures in Sweden and Italy were either killed or disappeared at the exact same time. In total, 25 of the West's top defense scientists were slain. Tony Collins, a correspondent who investigated each of the incidents, concluded that these deaths were most certainly the result of foul play. In his opinion, they weren't isolated incidents. They were most certainly connected. As of right now, nobody has ever been able to prove who was behind it all. Was this the work of the KGB, MI5, the CIA? Heck, was this simply the most unfortunate series of events of all time? Somehow, I doubt that very much, but as frequent listeners of this channel will no doubt know, strange things happen all the time. Perhaps the stress of working on such important projects got too much for these people. Whatever the case, this is an extremely bizarre, unresolved set of incidents, steeped in political intrigue and mystery. It really gets the grey matter working. If you'd like to read more about the Marconi mystery, I've left links to my sources in the description below. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, as you can probably tell, I have a bit of a cold going on right now, so please forgive my voice in this episode. But yeah, I don't think I've ever covered a single mystery in a video before, so it was nice to try something new, and because of the sickness, I wanted to keep it short. I hope you understand, you know. But I certainly think this was a case that was interesting enough to cover by itself. Lots to dig into. But what did you think? Would you like to hear more about scientists who've had mysterious accidents, quote-unquote? Let me know, maybe I can find some more. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of my patrons, especially my biggest supporters. Victor Javier Fonseca Ruiz, Maricruz Cedano, D. Apignani, Matthew J. Bauer, Anime Wimp, Fun with Failure, Stephanie, Crazy Mask Parade, James Labour, John Crouch, Lester Lido, Procupidine Natter, Bob the Davil, Gina Valera, Philip Westra, Alex Greensall, Monica Mendoza, Son of the Emperor, Crawford K. MacDonald, Marley Wright, and Ray Price Burton. A big salute to all of you. Remember to smash that like button, share the video around, leave a like and all that jazz, and I'll be back very, very soon with some more stories. Until then guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.